Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Sarah, and today I'm here with Alex.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be back with you.
So today, we're talking about a word that comes up a lot lately, especially in conversations about relationships, work, and mental health.
Yes, the word is boundaries.
And I think many people hear this word and feel like they understand it, but when they're asked to explain it, it suddenly becomes unclear.
Exactly. People say things like, you need boundaries, or I'm working on my boundaries, but they don't always know what that actually means in real life.
Sometimes it even feels uncomfortable, like the word itself carries tension.
Because boundaries force us to look at limits. And limits are not something most of us were taught to talk about openly.
That's why we chose this word. Not because it's trendy, but because it's deeply connected to how people live, relate, and protect themselves.
And today we're not going to rush it. We're going to slow down and really explore what boundaries mean emotionally, socially, and linguistically.
So let's begin.
When we talk about boundaries, we're really talking about where one person ends and another begins.
And that sounds simple, but in reality, it affects how we say yes, how we say no, how we explain ourselves, and how we respond to pressure.
Boundaries are not walls. They're not about isolation.
They're about clarity.
When people hear the word boundaries, they often react emotionally before they understand it. The word itself sounds firm, even rigid, so many assume it must mean emotional distance, coldness, or selfish behavior. In this misunderstanding, setting a boundary is seen as a sign that someone has stopped caring, stopped being kind, or stopped being available for others. But this interpretation misses the true purpose of boundaries entirely. Boundaries are not walls meant to shut people out. They are guidelines that help relationships function in a healthy and sustainable way. They exist not to reject others, but to prevent the quiet erosion of the self that happens when someone constantly prioritizes everyone else's needs over their own. Without boundaries, people often stretch themselves too thin, give more than they can afford emotionally or mentally, and slowly lose touch with who they are, what they value, and what they need. In that state, kindness becomes obligation, generosity becomes pressure, and connection turns into exhaustion. Boundaries, when understood correctly, are an act of self-respect and self-awareness. They allow a person to care for others without abandoning themselves in the process. Rather than reducing love or empathy, healthy boundaries actually protect them, making it possible to stay present, honest, and emotionally available without resentment or burnout.
That misunderstanding is exactly why so many people struggle with boundaries, and it doesn't come from nowhere. Most of us grow up in environments where politeness is praised more than honesty, where being easy to deal with is valued more than being authentic. From a very young age, we are taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that harmony matters more than discomfort, that good people don't make others uneasy, and that saying no should always come with guilt. So when something feels wrong inside us, when a request feels heavy, or a situation crosses an emotional line, we don't pause to examine that feeling. Instead, we override it. We tell ourselves that staying quiet is the mature choice, that tolerating discomfort is a sign of strength, and that sacrificing our own needs is simply part of being kind. Over time, this habit becomes automatic. We stop trusting our inner signals and start measuring our worth by how much we can endure without complaining. What begins as politeness slowly turns into self-silencing, and before we realize it, we are no longer choosing peace. We are paying for it with our own emotional well-being.
At first, it doesn't feel like a big problem at all. It feels small, almost harmless. You ignore one uncomfortable moment because it seems easier to stay silent than to explain yourself. Then another situation comes, and again you choose to let it pass. You tell yourself that it's not worth creating tension, not worth risking misunderstanding, not worth starting an argument over something that others might see as minor. Each time, the decision feels practical, even mature. But what you don't notice in the moment is the pattern forming underneath. With every ignored feeling, you teach yourself that your discomfort is less important than other people's comfort. Slowly, almost invisibly, you begin crossing your own boundaries before anyone else even has the chance to cross them. You stop checking in with what you need and start automatically adjusting yourself to fit situations that don't truly respect you. Over time, this creates a quiet disconnection from yourself, where the line between what you tolerate and what you accept becomes blurred, and your inner voice grows softer the more often it is ignored.
That's the dangerous part, and it's often the part people don't recognize until they're already exhausted. Once you become used to ignoring your own limits, no one needs to pressure you anymore. The pressure comes from inside. You begin to anticipate other people's needs before they even speak, adjusting yourself automatically, saying yes before checking how you feel, apologizing for things that don't require an apology. You overextend your time, your energy, and your emotional capacity because it has become normal to place yourself last. You over-explain your decisions, hoping that if others understand enough, they won't be disappointed in you. You overgive, not because you truly have more to give, but because you've learned that giving is safer than refusing. And then, quietly, the consequences appear. You feel drained, resentful, disconnected, sometimes even angry, not always at others, but at yourself for feeling this way. The exhaustion isn't sudden, it's cumulative. It comes from living in a constant state of self-abandonment, where your boundaries are crossed so often that they begin to feel invisible. This is why boundaries are not just about managing relationships with others. They are about maintaining a relationship with yourself, one where your limits are acknowledged, respected, and protected before burnout becomes your only signal that something is wrong.
What hurts most is not just what others did or didn't do, it's the awareness that you participated in your own silence. The exhaustion runs deeper than physical tiredness. It's emotional and moral fatigue. It comes from the moments you felt something was wrong but chose not to speak, from the times you sensed a boundary being crossed and convinced yourself it wasn't serious enough to mention. Over time, those small moments add up, and they leave behind a quiet but persistent self-blame. You start replaying conversations in your head, imagining what you could have said, what you should have said, and wondering why you didn't trust yourself enough to say it when it mattered. That quiet resentment is especially heavy because it has nowhere to go. You can't easily express it outwardly because on the surface, you were the one who agreed, who smiled, who said, "It's okay." So the resentment turns inward. It becomes frustration with yourself for always being understanding, always being patient, always being the one who adapts. Your needs don't disappear, they just wait. And when they are consistently placed last, they begin to feel invisible, even to you. This is when people start feeling disconnected from themselves, unsure of what they want, easily irritated, or emotionally numb. The pain isn't dramatic or loud, it's slow and corrosive. It comes from realizing that protecting everyone else's comfort came at the cost of your own, and that the person who needed your honesty the most was you.
Resentment doesn't appear because someone is cruel or unkind. It appears because something important has been ignored for too long. It is not a moral failure, and it does not mean you are selfish, ungrateful, or emotionally immature. In most cases, resentment is a delayed reaction to unmet needs. It forms quietly when you keep giving understanding without receiving it, when you keep adjusting while expecting yourself to handle it, and when you repeatedly choose peace on the surface over honesty underneath. What makes resentment confusing is that it often feels wrong to even have it, especially for people who are used to being patient and accommodating. But resentment is not evidence of bad character, it is evidence of emotional neglect, often self-neglect. At a deeper level, resentment is communication. It is your mind and body trying to speak when your voice has been silent. It shows up as irritation, withdrawal, sudden anger, or emotional distance, not because you want conflict, but because something inside you has reached its limit. Your nervous system recognizes imbalance before your logic does. Long before you can clearly say, "This is too much," your body feels it through tension, fatigue, anxiety, or heaviness. Resentment is the signal that says, "Something here is not okay anymore," even if you don't yet have the language to explain what that something is. This is why boundaries matter so much. Without boundaries, resentment becomes the only defense left. When you don't allow yourself to say no, to ask for space, or to express discomfort, resentment takes on the role of protectio, but it's a painful and indirect form of protection. It damages relationships slowly, because what could have been a clear, respectful boundary turns into emotional distance or quiet hostility. Learning to recognize resentment not as a flaw, but as information, is a turning point. It invites you to ask a different question, not, "What's wrong with me for feeling this way?" but, "What boundary was needed here, and why did I feel unable to say it?" That question is where real self-respect and emotional growth begin.
Boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out, and they aren't punishments or emotional weapons. They are not about creating distance for the sake of control, nor are they a sign that you are difficult or unkind. Boundaries are signals, calm, honest, and intentional signals that communicate where you end and where another person begins. They clarify responsibility, emotional space, and limits. When boundaries are present, people don't have to guess, assume, or overstep. Everyone knows what is expected, what is acceptable, and what is not. This clarity doesn't weaken connection, it stabilizes it. Without boundaries, relationships don't automatically become deeper or more loving, they become heavier. Emotional weight builds when one person absorbs more than they can carry, when needs go unspoken, and when expectations remain unclear. Instead of mutual care, the relationship turns into quiet endurance. You may still show up, still listen, still help, but over time it costs more energy, more patience, and more of your sense of self. What looks like closeness from the outside often feels like exhaustion on the inside. Boundaries prevent this slow erosion by protecting emotional balance before damage happens. Healthy boundaries allow connection to remain sustainable. They make space for honesty without hostility and care without self-erasure. When you say, "This is what I can offer," and "This is what I need to protect," you are not rejecting the other person, you are defining yourself. And relationships built on definition, not confusion, tend to last longer and feel safer. Boundaries do not reduce love. They give love structure. Without structure, even the strongest emotions collapse under their own weight.
And the truth is, people who truly respect you don't get offended by your boundaries. They listen. They adjust. The ones who get upset are often the ones who benefited from you having none.
As we're coming to the end of this conversation, I think what stands out most to me is that boundaries aren't something you set once and forget about. They're not a rule you announce and then move on. They're something you keep checking in with as you grow, as your relationships change, and as your needs become clearer. What felt acceptable a few years ago might no longer feel healthy today, and that doesn't mean you're becoming difficult. It means you're becoming more aware of yourself.
Exactly. And that awareness is really the heart of boundaries. It's not about controlling others or demanding perfection. It's about taking responsibility for your own emotional space. When you understand your limits, you stop expecting others to read your mind. You communicate more clearly, and you react less from frustration or resentment. Boundaries turn confusion into clarity, and clarity is one of the most respectful things you can offer in any relationship.
And maybe the most important thing to remember is this: setting boundaries doesn't make you less kind. In many cases, it makes you more honest. Instead of silently enduring situations that hurt you, you give people the chance to understand you better. You allow relationships to be based on truth, not performance or quiet sacrifice.
So if you take one thing from today's episode, let it be this: boundaries are not a sign of distance. They are a sign of self-respect. And self-respect is not selfish. It's the foundation of healthy communication, emotional safety, and long-lasting connection.
Thank you for being part of this conversation with us. Take some time to reflect on where your boundaries are and where they might need more care.
Thank you for being part of this conversation with us. Take some time to reflect on where your boundaries are and where they might need more care.